You ever wake up to find your prize-winning pumpkins missing, only to spot them an hour later, baked into pies at your neighbor's bake sale, with your name still faintly sharpened on the bottom of one? Yeah. That was my morning. It all started just like every other fall around here. Cool mornings, warm cider, and the familiar smell of pumpkin spice drifting from every kitchen but mine. My kitchen smelled like hard work, sweat, and determination. See, I don't just grow pumpkins. I grow the kind of pumpkins that make old farmers nod in respect and kids beg for photos. My pumpkins have won the county fair's pie contest 3 years running, and this year, I was sure I had the biggest, most glorious patch yet. The fair was only a week away, and I was already imagining the blue ribbon hanging over the fireplace, right next to my granddad. But dreams have a funny way of curdling when a certain someone gets involved. That someone is Karen. Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, the kind of woman who power walks with laminated community bylaws and has never met a no trespassing sign she didn't consider optional. She was always sniffing around, looking for reasons to fine me for things like untrimmed hedges or excessive rural aesthetic. I could handle that. What I couldn't handle was theft. I walked out to the patch that morning, coffee still in hand, ready to give my pumpkins their daily pep talk. Only half the patch was missing. Gone. Clean cuts at the stems, wheelbarrow tracks leading right under the hole in the fence, like a cartoon villain had struck in the night. My jaw hit the dirt faster than a sack of fertilizer. I stood there for a solid minute, blinking at the emptiness like maybe if I blinked enough, they'd just pop back into existence. Spoiler, they didn't. Now, I'd like to tell you I calmly assessed the situation, took stock, and filed a polite complaint. But no. I marched straight over to Karen's bake sale, still in my pajamas, boots caked with mud, and fury boiling hotter than the sun on a July afternoon. And there they were. Pies. Rows and rows of them. Pumpkin pies so big and golden they could only have come from one place, my patch. I knew every dimple and freckle on those pumpkins like a mother knows her child's face. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I spotted the faint sharper mark I used to number my prize pumpkins right there on the bottom of a pie tin. Karen was leaning over the table, flashing that fake, "Hi, neighbor," smile she always gave when she was up to no good. "Oh, these?" she chirped when I asked, voice syrupy sweet. "I just found some extras near the woods. Thought they were wild." Wild? Wild? Who in their right mind believes a perfectly manicured row of record-sized pumpkins, inside a fenced and posted patch, is just wild? But Karen wasn't blinking. She knew exactly what she was doing. And just like that, every single pumpkin pie on those tables wasn't just a dessert, they were stolen property. The thing is, everyone in town flocks to Karen's bake sale. It's the big fall fundraiser for the HOA, the kind of event where people show up with cash and leave with gossip. It wasn't just about the pies. It was about the principle, about pride, about the fact that Karen had pulled one over on me, smiling the whole time, and was about to walk away with not only my pumpkins but the glory, the praise, and who knows how much money. The unfairness burned worse than the time I accidentally set the garden shed on fire trying to smoke out wasps. I stood there, stunned, listening to people rave about how fresh the pies tasted, how local the pumpkins must be. I could almost hear Karen's smug thoughts, how she'd outfoxed me, how I couldn't prove a thing, how I'd just have to swallow it like a big slice of humble pie. Well, Karen underestimated just how stubborn I could be. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't flip the tables, though I dreamed about it for a hot second. No, I smiled, tipped my hat, and walked away. Because I already knew. If Karen wanted to turn this into a bake sale war, I wasn't going to fight fair. Not this time. The county fair might have been a week away, but revenge? Revenge was going to be served up at the next bake sale. And it was going to taste like pumpkin. I got back to the farm and stared at the patch for a long while, fury cooling into something sharper. Karen thought she'd beaten me. She thought stealing was as simple as snipping a few vines and baking some pies. But what she didn't realize was that a farm teaches you patience, planning, the satisfaction of watching something grow. And oh, I had something growing all right. It wasn't pumpkins anymore, it was a plan. A big, fat, delicious plan. And when it bloomed, Karen wouldn't know what hit her. The sun started to dip low behind the trees, casting the patch in long, golden shadows. I could almost hear my granddad's voice in the breeze. If you're gonna do it right. Oh, don't worry, Granddad. I'm gonna do it right. And that was the exact moment I knew. Karen wasn't just going to regret stealing my pumpkins. She was going to regret ever stepping foot on my land. And so it began. The thing about revenge is, if you're gonna cook it up, you better make sure it's seasoned just right. Karen had no idea who she'd messed with. This wasn't some neighborhood squabble over hedge heights or mailbox designs. No, this was theft, betrayal, and outright pumpkin pilfery. And if she thought I'd just let it slide because she smiled through her teeth and called it a misunderstanding, well, bless her heart. She was in for a surprise bigger than the county fair prize pumpkin. I sat on the porch that evening, staring out at the empty half of my patch, rolling a toothpick between my teeth and thinking. Karen loved her bake sales, loved the praise, loved the attention. She wasn't just stealing produce, she was stealing glory. And in this town, glory is currency. But if there's one universal truth about small-town life, it's that folks will forgive a lot. But gastrointestinal disasters at a public event? Now that sticks around like a bad tattoo. It started with some late-night research. Nothing sinister, just a little food science. The internet, bless its chaotic heart, is full of things you shouldn't know but can't help learning. Turns out, nature has its own tricks. I wasn't about to dump chemicals into a pie like some amateur. No, I needed something subtle, something that wouldn't alter the taste or texture, but would hit like a freight train when the time came. After a few hours and one questionable deep dive into some old herbal remedy forums, I had my answer. A harmless-looking blend of all-natural ingredients, commonly used in old folk recipes for cleansing, if you catch my drift. Karen and her bake sale attendees would never see it coming. But before I risked going full mad scientist, I needed to test the recipe. I wasn't about to unleash something without knowing the result. First victim? My cousin Earl, who's nosy enough to deserve it. Earl has this bad habit of checking in whenever I'm baking, which means hovering, taste testing, and offering unwanted advice. So, I whipped up a small batch of mini pies, sprinkled in just the right amount of my secret filling, and waited for Earl to show up like clockwork. Earl took one bite and declared it the best pumpkin pie I'd ever made. I watched as he devoured 2 more slices before heading home with the rest of the pan under his arm. About an hour later, I got the text. What in tarnation did you put in that pie? I ain't left the bathroom since supper. Success. I laughed so hard I almost fell out of my chair. Not that I felt too guilty. Earl's been borrowing my tools for years without returning them. Consider it even. With proof in hand, I knew the next step was to get Karen to take the bait. But Karen, being Karen, wouldn't accept anything from me directly. No, she was too prideful for that. So I needed her to steal from me again. Conveniently, she's as predictable as a rooster at sunrise. I spent the next few days crafting the most tempting-looking batch of pumpkins she'd ever seen. I arranged them right along the roadside, making sure they looked just ripe enough, just ready enough, like they'd been forgotten or abandoned by some careless farmer. Of course, I posted signs all around, private property, do not pick, and my personal favorite, pumpkins may bite. It was the kind of passive-aggressive sign Karen couldn't resist ignoring. I even made sure to leave the fence mysteriously unlocked one evening. Sure enough, the very next morning, I woke up to find the decoy pumpkins gone, and fresh wheelbarrow tracks leading straight toward Karen's property. I didn't even need to check the footage from the night vision camera I'd hidden behind the old maple tree, but when I did, I got a full-on show. Karen, in a tracksuit and garden gloves, sneaking through the patch like she was pulling off a heist, struggling to lift the heavy pumpkins, muttering under her breath about how they'll be perfect. It would have been funnier if I hadn't been so mad. With Karen now unknowingly in possession of my hand-picked decoy pumpkins, the final step was simple. I baked. Oh, I baked like I was hosting the Last Supper. Pies, muffins, little pumpkin hand pies. Every single one laced with the special ingredient, carefully measured to avoid suspicion but effective enough to guarantee result. I boxed them up nice and neat, wrote a sweet little note, a token of peace for the bake sale, enjoy. I figured Karen couldn't resist using them. After all, who turns down free baked goods, especially when they think they've already won? The next morning, I walked right up to her door, smiling like the fool she thought I was. She opened the door, already dressed in one of her ridiculous fall y'all aprons, and gave me a look like she couldn't decide if she wanted to slam the door or offer me lemonade. I held up the box and played it cool. "Oh," she said, faking surprise. "Well, I suppose we can put them out at the sale. Nice of you to come around." "Anything for the community," I replied, tipping my hat. The look on her face when she closed the door was priceless, half suspicious, half smug. Back at the farm, I watched from a distance as the bake sale setup began. Karen was in full hostess mode, arranging tables, directing volunteers, and proudly displaying my pies right in the center like trophies. I knew by the way she handled them that she hadn't bothered to taste test a single one. Overconfident as ever. Perfect. As folks began arriving, filling their plates with pumpkin treats, I leaned back against my truck, watching it all unfold like a carefully planned stage play. Karen laughed and chatted, flipping her hair and basking in the attention like she was the belle of the ball. Little did she know, the curtain was about to rise on Act 2. The town's biggest bake sale was about to become its biggest disaster. And all I had to do now was sit back, sip my cider, and wait. Patience, after all, is the farmer's best friend. The funny thing about chaos is you never quite know when it's going to hit, but when it does, you feel it coming like a summer thunderstorm. The bake sale was in full swing, kids running wild with caramel apples, old folks gossiping under the tent, and Karen right in the middle of it all, playing queen of the festival. Her precious table was stacked high with pies, cookies, muffins, all pumpkin, all stolen, and all unknowingly laced with my secret recipe. I leaned against my truck, arms crossed, and waited. I wasn't sure exactly when it would kick in, but when it did, I knew it'd be a show worth remembering. At first, everything looked normal. Folks took generous slices of pie, humming in approval as they chewed. Karen, never one to miss a chance to be the center of attention, stood proudly behind the table, telling anyone who'd listen about how these pies are made from fresh, local pumpkins, the best you can get. The nerve of her, standing there, stealing both my produce and my title as the town's best baker, all while pretending it was charity work. I almost felt bad. Almost. The first signs came about 20 minutes in. It was subtle at first, a kid tugging on his mom's sleeve, looking uncomfortable. An older gentleman shifting in his chair, face scrunching like he'd bitten into a sour lemon. Then came the whispers. Someone asked where the nearest bathroom was. Someone else asked if there were any more facilities because the one by the gazebo was already full. Karen, too busy basking in her stolen glory, didn't even notice. But I did. I knew exactly what was happening. And as the minutes ticked by, so did the stomachs. By the 30-minute mark, the bake sale turned into something you'd see on one of those reality shows where everything goes wrong. Grown adults were scrambling toward the portable toilets like they were giving away gold inside. Kids were crying, teenagers were clutching their stomachs, and the line to the bathroom stretched past the cider stand and wrapped around the face-painting booth. A choir of grumbles, groans, and hurried footsteps echoed across the field. People were ditching plates mid-bite, abandoning pastries like they were cursed. Then came the real spectacle. Karen herself, having sampled her own stash of pies, no doubt eager to impress the town council members, started to shift uncomfortably behind the table. She fanned herself with a pamphlet and excused herself mid-conversation. She made it halfway across the field before realizing the bathrooms were full to bursting. The horror on her face was worth every second I spent perfecting that filling. She sprinted like a high school track star who just heard the starting pistol, tripping over a hay bale in the process and landing flat on her face. Folks gasped, others tried not to laugh, but I saw it, the telltale stains spreading across the front of her precious fall y'all apron. I stood there, sipping cider like it was the finest champagne. If Karen thought she could steal from me, humiliate me, and then get away scot-free, she clearly didn't know who she was messing with. The whole field was unraveling into absolute chaos. The bouncy house deflated as a panicked dad crashed into it, dragging 3 kids with him as he made a beeline for the woods. One of the mayor's aides was seen sprinting behind a row of pumpkins with an expression I'll never forget. And the mayor himself? Let's just say his speech was cut tragically short when he doubled over mid-sentence and had to be helped away by 2 equally distressed city council members. Karen tried to regain control. She stood up, apron stained, hair askew, and attempted to act like nothing had happened. "It's just a little excitement," she chirped weakly into the microphone. "Part of the fun of," but before she could finish, she doubled over, clutching her stomach, and bolted for the parking lot, leaving her bake sale, her pride, and what was left of her dignity behind. By now, the whole town was buzzing, not about how delicious the pies were, but about how the bake sale had turned into the Great Pumpkin Purge. I knew it wouldn't take long before someone figured out that every disaster traced back to Karen's pies. And sure enough, later that evening, my phone lit up with a clip someone had filmed and posted online. Karen, face pale, apron ruined, scrambling across the field, edited in slow motion with dramatic violin music and the caption, #PooPieKaren. It spread faster than wildfire on social media. By the time the sun went down, it had been shared by just about everyone in the Tri-County area, and folks were already joking about adding it to next year's fall festival lineup. I could have ended it there, content to let the meme do its work, but Karen wasn't just about to lose followers. This was about to hit her where it really hurt, the HOA. Sure enough, 2 days later, a letter went out announcing an emergency meeting. Karen, flustered and desperate, tried to spin the story as an unfortunate flu outbreak and blamed it on the cider vendor. But nobody was buying it. Too many people had seen the Sharpie marks on the bottom of the pie pans. Too many people knew those were my pumpkins. At the meeting, Karen stood there in front of the board, attempting to salvage what little was left of her reputation. But it was useless. Footage played on the projector, courtesy of a tech-savvy teenager who edited together the entire disaster with commentary. Karen couldn't argue, couldn't charm her way out of it, not with half the town glaring at her and the other half giggling behind their hands. The HOA voted her out in record time. Karen tried to threaten legal action, but even her husband looked like he wanted to disappear under the table. It wasn't just a loss. It was a public exile. I sat in the back row, arms crossed, doing my best not to laugh. I didn't need to say a word. The footage, the chaos, the stains, it all spoke for itself. Karen had taken the bait, and in doing so, took herself down. As I walked out of that meeting, the autumn air never smelled so sweet. Revenge, as it turns out, wasn't just best served cold. It tasted mighty fine baked into a pumpkin pie. A week after the infamous bake sale disaster, the town had all but turned the page, but the legend of Karen's downfall kept growing like a well-watered weed. Every conversation at the diner, every whispered chuckle outside the post office, every pumpkin spice latte served at the local cafe came with a side of gossip about the Great Pumpkin Purge. Kids were reenacting Karen's frantic dash across the bake sale grounds like it was a scene from a Broadway show. Someone even printed shirts with Karen's panicked face and the words, "Fall Y'all 2025" beneath it. I'd never seen anything catch fire in this town quite like this. I would have felt bad if I hadn't spent the last 5 years suffering under Karen's rule of pettiness. No, this wasn't guilt I was feeling. It was satisfaction, pure and simple. That morning, as I was repairing the fence Karen had so kindly cut through, a beat-up sedan pulled into my driveway, kicking up dust. Out stepped Karen herself, though she barely resembled the iron-fisted HOA president who used to strut around barking orders. She looked smaller somehow, more brittle. The wind could have knocked her down if it wanted to. She walked up to the fence line holding a fruitcake wrapped in plastic and wearing the kind of forced smile you only put on when you know you've lost but refuse to admit it. I leaned on the post driver and waited. I wanted to apologize, she said, avoiding eye contact like I was the sun and she was a vampire. I might have, overstepped with the pumpkins. I didn't realize they were such a big deal. I didn't answer right away. I just let the silence hang in the air like a heavy fog. Karen shifted from foot to foot. She thrust the fruitcake toward me like it might shield her from judgment. It's just a little something. Peace offering. The fruitcake sagged slightly, like it knew it wasn't welcome here. I took it anyway, partly because I knew it would make her uncomfortable, and partly because I knew the pigs would probably appreciate it more than I ever could. Well, I said, after giving her one of those slow, long looks farmers are famous for. Suppose I appreciate the gesture. I didn't, not really, but I appreciated watching Karen squirm. She nodded, mumbled something about seeing herself out, and hurried back to her car, leaving behind a trail of dust and what little pride she had left. Later that day, I tossed the fruitcake to the pigs, who sniffed it like they were inspecting counterfeit currency before deciding it was good enough to devour. I couldn't help but laugh. Even the pigs knew better than to trust Karen's baked goods. By the next morning, the story had grown another branch. Folks heard about the fruitcake delivery and spun it into rumors of Karen begging for forgiveness at my doorstep. I didn't correct them. Let the myth grow, I thought. The county fair arrived a few days later, and for the first time in years, it wasn't overshadowed by HOA drama or Karen's overbearing bake sale booth. The air was crisp, the pies were honest, and the pumpkins on display? Well, they were all mine. I walked through the fairgrounds feeling lighter than I had in months. It was funny how a little justice, served warm and spiced just right, could settle the soul. When the pie contest rolled around, I wasn't sure if I'd even enter after everything, but something about the clean autumn air and the sight of families enjoying the fair without worry gave me the nudge I needed. I submitted my best pie yet, made with the few pumpkins Karen hadn't touched. No laxatives, no trick. Just honest-to-goodness hard work. And when the blue ribbon was pinned to my entry later that afternoon, I knew it wasn't just about winning. It was about getting back something Karen had tried to steal, my pride. The best part wasn't even the ribbon. It was seeing Karen, standing off to the side near the caramel apple stand, pretending to browse while clearly watching the whole thing unfold. Her bake sale was a bust. The HOA had appointed a new president, a no-nonsense woman named Darlene, who had already banned Karen from planning so much as a potluck. Karen didn't even have the nerve to enter anything in the fair this year. She just stood there like a ghost at her own funeral, watching as I accepted the ribbon to a round of applause. Back at the farm, I decided to put the prize money to good use. Not on fancy equipment or a new truck like some folks suggested, but on a proper security fence. One that would light up like a Christmas tree if anyone tried sneaking in again. And just for fun, I built a scarecrow. Not just any scarecrow. This one wore a wig, an apron, and held a fake pie plate. It was a little petty, sure, but sometimes you have to leave a reminder. I made sure it faced the road, right where Karen could see it every time she drove by. And so, life settled back into its rightful rhythm. The pumpkins grew, the pigs grunted, and the folks in town never quite stopped laughing about the bake sale incident. Karen, stripped of her title and her bake sale crown, kept her distance. Every now and then, I'd spot her driving past the farm, eyes flicking nervously toward the scarecrow. I couldn't help but smile. There was peace now, sure, but I knew better than anyone. Peace in this town is always temporary. One crisp evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and the fields glowed gold, I sat on the porch with a slice of my winning pie and a cup of cider. The whole ordeal had reminded me of one simple truth. You don't mess with a farmer's harvest and expect to get away with it. The land teaches patience, but it also teaches consequence. And Karen? Well, she learned that lesson the hard way. As I leaned back in my chair and listened to the crickets sing, I glanced out at the patch. I could almost hear my granddad chuckling in the wind. If you're gonna do it right. And by my count, I sure did.